The late 19th century was an age of steam, steel, and burgeoning national pride in Europe. Following the Enlightenment, many nations had formally emancipated their Jewish populations, promising an era of integration and equality. Yet, this promise proved to be a fragile one. For millions of Jews, the old hatreds did not disappear. They simply put on modern clothes. In the vast Russian Empire, antisemitism was a brutal fact of life. Beginning in 1881, waves of violent riots, known as pogroms, swept through the Jewish settlements of the Pale, sanctioned by an indifferent government. These attacks saw homes and businesses destroyed and countless lives lost. Draconian laws were passed, restricting where Jews could live, what jobs they could hold, and how many could attend university. For these communities, the question was not one of social advancement, but of basic survival. In Western and Central Europe, the hatred was more subtle but no less potent. A new, so-called scientific antisemitism emerged, which reframed Jews not as followers of a different religion, but as an alien race incapable of true loyalty to the nations in which they lived. This ideology seeped into politics, academia, and the popular press, poisoning the very air of the continent. The breaking point came in 1894, in the heart of what was thought to be Europe's most enlightened nation, France. Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish artillery captain, was arrested and convicted of treason on the basis of forged documents. A Viennese journalist and playwright named Theodor Herzl was sent to cover the public degradation ceremony. What he saw that day in Paris, a decorated officer, stripped of his rank, while crowds chanted, "Death to the Jews," shattered his belief in assimilation. He realized that if this could happen in France, no Jewish person was truly safe anywhere in Europe. This profound disillusionment ignited a new purpose within Herzl. He channeled his journalistic skill and theatrical flair into a powerful new vision. In 1896, he published a short but explosive book, Der Judenstaat, the Jewish State. In it, he laid out a clear and pragmatic plan. The Jewish question, he argued, was a national problem that required a political solution. The creation of a modern, secular, and sovereign state for the Jewish people. This was not a religious dream of messianic return, but a practical project of national liberation. Herzl's idea electrified a generation weary of persecution and empty promises. He worked tirelessly, using his diplomatic and organizational skills to bring his vision to life. In August 1897, he convened the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, representatives of Jewish communities from across the globe gathered to chart their own political destiny. In his diary, Herzl wrote, with astonishing foresight, "In Basel, I founded the Jewish state. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50, everyone will see it." The political movement of Zionism was born, and the long, arduous journey to turn this declaration into a reality had begun. The death of Theodor Herzl in 1904 left the Zionist movement without its charismatic founder, but not without its purpose. The groundwork laid in Basel had taken root. As the world careened towards the Great War, the shifting sands of global power presented an unforeseen opportunity. The Ottoman Empire, which had ruled Palestine for 400 years, sided with Germany and the Central Powers, placing its territory in the crosshairs of the Allied forces, primarily Great Britain. While soldiers fought in the trenches, another battle was being waged in the halls of power in London. The key figure was Dr. Chaim Weizmann, a brilliant chemist and a pragmatic Zionist leader. Weizmann's scientific contributions to the British war effort, combined with his tireless diplomacy, gained him access to the highest levels of government. He argued that Zionist goals were aligned with British strategic interests in a post-Ottoman Middle East. In 1917, his efforts culminated in a monumental breakthrough, a letter from British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. The Balfour Declaration was a short document with world-altering implications. For the first time, a major global power, formally declared its support for the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. With the end of the war and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the League of Nations granted Britain a mandate to govern Palestine. The Balfour Declaration was written into the mandate, giving Zionism the international legal backing it had long sought. The gates to Palestine, while not wide open, were ajar. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, waves of Jewish immigrants, known as Aliyot, arrived, driven by Zionist idealism and fleeing rising antisemitism in Europe. These pioneers, the Halutziim, began to build the foundations of a state. They drained swamps, irrigated deserts, and established collective agricultural communities, the kibbutzim. The Alduish city of Tel Aviv rose from sand dunes, becoming a bustling cultural and economic center. However, this national project was not taking place in an empty land. To the Arab population that had lived in Palestine for centuries, the influx of immigrants and the purchase of land represented a direct threat to their own identity and future. They saw Zionism not as a national liberation movement, but as a European colonial enterprise. Tensions, which had been simmering for years, began to boil over. In 1929, disputes over the Western Wall erupted into violent riots, leading to a massacre of the ancient Jewish community in Hebron. From 1936 to 1939, a full-scale Arab revolt rocked Palestine, targeting both British forces and Jewish settlements. Caught between two competing nationalisms, Britain struggled to maintain control, facing fierce Arab resistance, and with the world sliding towards another war, London reversed its policy. In 1939, it issued a white paper, severely restricting Jewish immigration to Palestine to just 75,000 over 5 years. The policy was a devastating blow to the Zionist cause. For the Jews of Europe, now facing the existential threat of Nazi Germany, the doors to their promised national home were being slammed shut, just when they needed escape the most, as the full horror of the Holocaust was revealed to the world in 1945. The Jewish question took on a terrible, new urgency. Hundreds of thousands of survivors, with no homes or families to return to, languished in displaced persons camps. For them, the Zionist dream was no longer an ideology, but the only hope for a future. Yet, Britain, still holding the mandate for Palestine, kept its gates firmly shut. The defining symbol of this policy was the ship Exodus 1947, packed with 4,500 survivors. It was intercepted by the Royal Navy and forced to return to Germany, a spectacle of cruelty that shocked the world and made the British position untenable. Broken by the violence and unable to reconcile its conflicting promises, Great Britain announced it was terminating its mandate in handing the problem of Palestine to the newly formed United Nations. The UN appointed a special committee, which, after months of investigation, proposed a radical solution to partition the land into two states, one Arab and one Jewish, with Jerusalem to be administered as an international city. On November 29, 1947, the UN General Assembly voted on Resolution 181. The resolution passed. The Jewish world erupted in celebration, seeing the vote as the fulfillment of a 2,000-year-old dream. But the Arab world, and the Arabs of Palestine, vehemently rejected the partition, viewing it as a theft of their homeland. The UN vote was not a beginning of peace, but a declaration of war. Even before the British mandate officially ended, a brutal civil war broke out across Palestine as Jewish and Arab militias fought for control of roads and territory. Then, on May 14, 1948, hours before the last British soldiers departed, David Ben-Gurion, the head of the Jewish Agency, stood before a crowd in Tel Aviv and declared the establishment of the State of Israel, Herzl's prophecy made 50 years earlier, had come true. The declaration was a gamble for survival. The very next day, the armies of 5 neighboring Arab nations, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded, aiming to destroy the nascent state. The poorly armed Israelis, now united under the new Israel Defense Forces, fought a desperate war for their independence. After more than a year of brutal fighting, a series of armistices were signed in 1949. Israel had survived and even expanded its territory beyond the UN partition borders. But this victory came at a staggering cost. For Israelis, it was the triumphant war of independence. For Palestinians, it was the Nakba, the catastrophe. Over 700,000 Arabs fled or were expelled from their homes in the territory that became Israel, creating a refugee crisis that remains unresolved to this day. The 1948 war did not end the conflict over the Holy Land. It cemented its tragic contours, giving birth to a sovereign Jewish state, but also setting the stage for decades of war, occupation, and a seemingly intractable struggle between two peoples claiming the same small piece of land.